It says that I am now live. Let's see. Hello.
Hello.
I'm just inviting Kristin.
We did a little practice run earlier. I was hoping I was going to be able to use my laptop for this, and apparently we
I,
cannot.
I was hoping to use my laptop too, but apparently I also cannot.
Yeah, so it's a handheld situation.
Yeah, I've got mine set up against my laptop. Um,
That's a good idea. Let me try that.
um, hi,
Yeah.
person. I'm good.
Hey,
How are you?
how's it going?
We're just
I'm
gonna
all
wait a
right.
couple minutes till more people get on and get all settled in. All settled in here. I tweaked my knee again, really good. And
Oh no, that's no good.
yeah, I know it's um elevated. I've taken some meds and it's on ice, but I'm really hoping I don't have to get uh, the more surgery after that one.
Oh,
Yeah, big
no.
day. Big day today.
Making a phone
Look,
stand.
really warm out there.
I
Are you in
was in
Peru? Is that
Peru
right? Or
until yesterday, and the sort of the country has uh, sort of lots
saw
going on
that?
in Peru right
Yeah.
now, and we had a whole bunch of um, like actual roadblocks and a lot of the highways that we would pass, and it just got to be a little dangerous
Yeah.
for us. So we fled the country yesterday,
Oh
and
my
we're actually in
goodness.
sort of waiting it out for maybe a couple weeks until things look better over there, and maybe we'll go back over there. But if not, then maybe this knee thing today is a sign that I should just go home and yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Um,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Well,
And that was
we still have
weeks ago.
3 more minutes to sort of wait before we get started. Yeah, like I said, Peru was nuts. Uh, we were supposed to visit my partner's family for Christmas over there, and they canceled last minute and canceled all their tours and all their hotel or Airbnbs, and um, then we just met in Ecuador, and I can look out my window and see Cotopaxi, which is really special because I actually climbed Cotopaxi 9 years ago as of yesterday. So yesterday was my 9-year anniversary of making the summit of that. So that was really special to be like see that beautiful
That's
mountain. Yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
my body was different and
Yeah. Always fun to
yeah,
remember.
or not. It's not sometimes it's I mean, we'll get into it. We'll get into it in a little bit with you, with both of you, really. But yeah, just the recovery process of, post injury at our age is mentally and emotionally and physically just debilitating. um, so yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So where are you both right now before we get started? We have 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. So, Aavron, where are you sitting right now?
I'm in my oldest son's bedroom in Monument, Colorado, sitting in my oldest son's bedroom for some quiet surroundings because, it's the holidays and there's lots of people here. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And what about you?
I am in Incline Village, which is the Nevada and north end of Lake Tahoe, in the new
Oh,
apartment I just rented. So, um, in the process of it's a little bit of a disaster. I'm putting together a nightstand, and but I
is it a
got a
real one or a
Christmas
fake
tree,
one?
so
Nice.
real.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's exciting. You had mentioned that
yeah,
you had made
yeah.
the plunge to to head out to incline and do some serious rehabbing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's gonna be a minute, so stick with the got really great doctors here, so and then I can still be in the mountains and have the lake, which is just it's like its own, I don't know, its own life form.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Okay, well, it's 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Turns out it's also 3 o'clock in Peru and Ecuador, so that was convenient. Um, I just want to say I'm Ashley. I host and produce and create and edit and all the things of the Sharp End podcast. I've been doing it for I think 7 years. Thanks everyone for listening to my show and supporting my show. I have two very special people here with me today on my first Instagram Live, and I got to interview Aavron, but I didn't get to actually interview you. That's kind of why we're doing the follow up, is because there's so much that was missed in that episode 82, impaled on Mount Rainier. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to chat with both of you, and also to hear sort of a follow up of how you're both doing now and what your future holds, what your near future holds for you both. Yeah, thanks so much everybody for joining us today. I did get some emails and DMs with questions that people wanted me to ask that couldn't be here. So at the end, I'll ask those questions too. But I would like to start off by having both of you introduce yourself to our audience.
Go first, Kristin.
Great. So I'm Kristin Jones, originally from Seattle. I made my way out to Colorado a few years ago and met Aavron, and we became adventure partners over the past couple years. I started my love of the outdoors in my late 20s, actually. I was a late bloomer. I didn't learn to snowboard till like 25, 26. And I didn't even know you could climb mountains until my gym invited me to summit Mount Rainier in 2015. And that started my love of mountaineering. And I have been working the past 2 years really actively with Mick Pearson from Cough Adventures in Seattle through his mentorship program to learn more technical skills in the mountains and rock climbing. And yeah, so all of that led to me and Aavron and where we are today. And I don't know if you guys heard, but I'm now up by Lake Tahoe as I continue to rehab.
Thank you for introducing yourself. And Aavron?
I'm Aavron Estep, originally born in Germany, and lived my childhood between Missouri and Germany, and came to Colorado for the first time when I was 20 years old. I started climbing when I lived in Arkansas. I lived in Arkansas for my senior year, and if you're a climber and know anything about Arkansas, there's, fantastic climbing at Horseshoe Canyon and some other places, Sam's Throne and all that kind of stuff. That's where I kind of cut my teeth in the climbing world, but was always an avid hiker and backpacker, even within the Midwest and the South, and made my first journey to Colorado when I was 20 years old with Chris Bruns. Hopefully he's listening, so shout out to Chris Bruns. We came out here and climbed up to Long Lake up in Estes Park and went fly fishing for 3 days. And it's just right up my alley and the things that I like to do. There's nothing more that I like to do more than spending my time like lost in the wilderness. And so eventually met somebody from Colorado and ended out here in part because of them. But it's been probably the best move of my life. And, ski, snowboard, climb, 14ers, all that kind of stuff. I've done some mountain biking and kayaking and stuff intermittently through there as well, but just a big outdoor enthusiast. And yeah, as Kristin we met a couple of years ago. And we've done a bunch of 14er bagging together. We've done the R3, which is running all the way across the Grand Canyon and back, done some multi-pitch climbing, and started towards some bigger mountaineering goals together.
Very cool. Well, again, thanks so much, you both, for being on this show or on this Instagram Live follow-up. So just to recap to the folks that have and have not listened to that episode 82. Basically, yeah, Aavron and Kristin were climbing Rainier. What month? It was June or July, wasn't it?
July 4th.
July 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, July 4th of this last year or this year. And you know, at one point Kristin was like, "Hey, you know, if you could, at any point you feel like you can stop at a safe spot, I could totally have some snacks and some water, right?" And so Aavron at one point is keeps it in mind and kind of trudges along, and then he feels like you got a good spot to stop. And then, you know, you turn and your foot slips, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, next thing is you just remember tumbling and falling,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of realize, oh shoot, like I'm falling. I'm gonna pull my partner down with me. She needs to arrest, you know, and hopefully she can arrest, because the snow is challenging snow conditions. So that's all going through your head as you're falling. And you know, you had recorded on your GPS like it was about 900 feet that you fell, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you both fell about 900 feet down the Winthrop Glacier,
Mm-hmm.
and during that fall, you, Aavron, were impaled by your ice axe, narrowly missing vital organs by like, what did you say, like millimeters?
Yeah. I mean, so my left lung was nicked and my esophagus was nicked. You know, I had 4 broken ribs. It went between the ribs, like right here in my chest, just to the right of my sternum. And went in at an angle, down and at an angle, and came out on the left side of my back over here. But yeah, so it had a bilateral pneumothorax, bilateral hemothorax, a pneumomediastinum, a completely collapsed right lung, a partially collapsed left lung, the nicked esophagus, nicked lung, and then 4 broken ribs. And then my crampons had also gone into my leg and ripped the inside of my leg open. So, Kristin.
And so that's what we didn't get to hear, was Kristin's whole side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
We scheduled 3 of us, tried to schedule a few times, and it just didn't work out with all of our schedules. And I'm really sorry for that. But now we have you here. So yeah, so again, we were able to hear your experience. I have some notes here. And so Kristin, like, we got to hear Aavron's experience of fall, like, you know, slipping and then falling and then sliding and then slowly coming to a stop. Then, but what were all of those moments like for you?
Yeah. Terrifying to simplify it. Yeah. I looked up and just saw that he was starting to fall, and you know, physics were not in my favor, you know, especially after doing a kind of a post talk with my mentor as well about the situation. And once you're in that kind of situation, like, you know, gravity is not in your favor. And, you know, even trying to self arrest, you know, might have made my injuries, you know, is what it was, you know. But, you know, when you're trying to dig in with your crampons and on your feet and your ice axe, you know, you're just getting wrenched. So yeah, I looked up and saw Aavron falling, and I just screamed, like, no, like, Aavron, you know, try to stop yourself. And just from then on, as soon as, you know, he came down and yanked me, it was just no, like, just screaming, you know. I just really felt like, yeah. And I really thought that was it. Like, I knew the crevasses that were below. I knew eventually there would be just a cliff edge that we would probably just fly over. And so that's where my brain went. And you know, there was one point we did slow down, and again, just tried to, I feel like I, you know, tried to dig in, and my ice axe flew out of my hand. I chose the option to not have that tethered to my body. And really just went for a ride, and then miraculously we hit like a softer snow patch, and Aavron was slowing down, and I actually slowly kind of came past him, and we both actually stopped in the snow, and that was just really surreal. We, because I didn't expect that. And at that point, there was just a lot of fear that we would start sliding again, because we did have a moment up above where we both started to slow down, and then it just picked up traction again and speed. So, at that point, it was just really trying to assess the situation, and I knew immediately there was something wrong with my left leg. And I didn't want to, I was landed so that I was face down on my knees.
Face down on your belly?
Yeah, so kind of almost kneeling in the snow. My knees had point of contact on the ground, and then face down. And as we assessed the situation, was really afraid we would start to fall again, and I was looking at myself, and the rope had gotten all tangled around me, and I could not actually get to anything on my backpack, or get the rope off me, or get my backpack off of me. And so fortunately at that point, Aavron was awake and communicating, and I also realized that in the fall, I have my Garmin attached via the carabiner that they provide onto my backpack here. But that carabiner is attached to a plastic piece that slides onto the Garmin inReach, and that had just come off. So I emailed them, never heard back, that this is really poor manufacturing, and the Mini is better, and adding better carabiners. His was also higher up on his shoulder, which I think helped a lot too. So my Garmin inReach was ripped off. My cell phone I have in a pocket here, and it wasn't zipped, because we'd probably just been taking a photo at some point. So that flew off, and I also had my my radio there as well, which also got ripped off. So I am feeling completely helpless, afraid to move. And fortunately, Aavron is lucid and talking, and he immediately flips his Garmin inReach SOS on, and he immediately gets on the radio, and as soon as the accident stopped, like I've said, everything that happened from that point forward is just, was just like clockwork, perfect, amazing. And the other group that was climbing just below us on the mountain, and they were on skis, and they were catching up with us, or on the same channel. They heard us right away. They activated their Garmin, and then we were communicating with them that, we were in a really bad situation. At that point, I could definitely, I could look back, I could see my left leg was at an angle that it shouldn't have been below the knee. And I was like, I'm not quite sure what's going on with my right ankle or right leg, but it doesn't feel great. And then Aavron was communicating to me that, at that point, he said, Kristin, tell my boys I love them. I'm not going to make it. And I was just like, no, that's not an option. And it never crossed my mind on the mountain that he really, that he was going to die. After that, it just wasn't an option. And I, was harassing him, answer the radio, respond to the radio. Are you still with me? I would not let him, relax.
Because in the episode, Aavron, you said that you were within talking distance. You didn't have to yell to each other. So about how far away were you from each other, laying there, when you had stopped?
15 yards, maybe.
Yeah.
I think.
But too far away to be able to assess each other's injuries.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I could see Kristin, and I could see her leg, just her down to her knee is going straight out, and then just past her knee is almost it's kicked over about like that. It's clearly broken, and she's not able to move. But yeah, she was making the comment that like she kept talking to me. It was very annoying. It was so hard to breathe, and it was very hard to talk. It was very labored, and so she kept checking in with me, and I'm like, I'm alive. Like, stop. um, but go ahead.
You're like proof of life. I'm just trying to survive over here.
Yeah, but it was. I mean, because I kept Yorn kept communication with me over the radio. The two mountaineers that were now above us, they had tripped their SOS-2 after I'd requested that they do so and communicate with SAR directly, and then he kept trying to touch base with me as well. And so my walkie-talkie was on my right shoulder, and so I had to keep reaching across and like kind of rolling up to be able to talk to him. And the hole's right here in my chest, and just still bleeding, at a slower rate. And it was just, I mean, just doing this motion was pretty excruciating.
Yeah. So you actually asked Kristin to tell your boys that you love them, like as you were laying there in your head, realizing you had put your fingers in the hole, you had realized you had a hole like through your whole body. In that moment, you're like, I am gonna die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I I thought I had 2 minutes. I was certain I was going to bleed out. I actually lost my dad in a car accident in 2016, and so there were a number of things that I had thought about. But I don't know if I mentioned this in the podcast or not. But like, I knew I was going to die. I thought about my boys, and I kind of laid there thinking about my dad for a second, and the fact that he had died in a car accident. And I'd lost my grandfather the month before. He died suddenly of a heart attack or heart failure. But lost my dad, lost my grandfather. I was laying on that mountain and just looking out, and I was like, well, at least I'm dying with an epic view, doing something I love. And then it was just completely centered on my boys and what their life was going to be like without me. And I think the first thing I said to Kristin was, Kristin, I'm dead. And she's like, no, don't say that. And then I said, Kristin, I've been impaled with my axe. And like she said, I asked her to tell my boys that I loved them, but I had no expectation of making it.
And Kristin, and you mentioned when he asked you that, you just, in your mind and your heart, you're like, no, I'm not doing that. You're not gonna die.
Yeah, that I think after after I got over like the fact that we're now gonna live, I'm like, we're gonna live. I mean, knowing now I had no control over that, and we were incredibly fortunate and did everything right, and everything came together so perfectly to get us off that mountain. And Aavron packing his wound, like, he probably, in all honesty, would have died. But I am very glad that we're getting to talk to you guys right now.
The surgeons did tell you that if you hadn't come up with the idea in that moment to actually take snow, this resource that is abundant, you were laying on and bleeding out on, if you hadn't had this idea in that moment to take the snow and cram it in that wound, like you would probably.
Yeah, I was told that repeatedly by many doctors. I was in the hospital in Washington for 4 or 5 days, and then I came here, and shortly after being back, I ended up in the hospital a lot. I was in and out of the ER. I had more than one multiple day stay, with my longest one being 8 days. The 8-day one was the one that I had one surgery previous to the 8-day stay and a couple of day stay with that first initial surgery. And then I had 4 more surgeries after that over the course of the 8 days that I was in the hospital. And so I've seen lots of doctors. And that was the reoccurring theme. I was told repeatedly that had I not done that, I would not be here. And I received several units of blood in Washington as well. So.
Go away. No, no gracias.
Oh, sorry. I'm just waiting for one of my kids to bust in the room and be like, I have a question. Caleb said that he had a question yesterday.
Speaking of questions, if the people that are on the show in this live viewing right now, you can type a comment into the chat, I think, and then we can follow up with those towards the end. So I do see I have one question, and we'll get to that at the end. Okay, so sorry for the interruption. So where were we? Okay, so Kristin, what in the heck is happening with you then? So because Aavron, we know his story. If you follow the Sharpen, you've listened to episode 82, we know his story, but we want to hear really also what happened to you. And then we want to move forward with, we want to kind of close with, you know, both of your rehabs and recoveries and what life is like for you now. And then we'll end with questions. So Kristin, go ahead and share a little bit about your experience from laying there, staring at Aavron, bothering him repeatedly by, you know, making him answer you so he wouldn't die. What was it like from you from then on, knowing that your leg was the wrong way and knowing that when he got airlifted off, you're stuck there with one SAR person, you know, like potentially if the weather came in, you and that one SAR person are literally going to be there overnight together. And do you think in that moment, like, am I going to make it overnight? So what are your thoughts in those moments when you and Aavron are laying in the snow together?
Yeah, so I looked at my watch when the accident happened, and I think it was about 8:15. And from there, you know, a lot of pain was starting to come on board. My legs were starting to swell, so I knew the left leg was a problem. And I had on they're like Spantec, I think Spantec, La Sportiva boots, double plastics, which is great. It keeps your legs nice and warm, but also heavy. And you know, I started to feel like a tourniquet on my leg, and I was really worried about, you know, not only was my leg severely broken, like, you know, if it tourniqueted the leg, like what was going to happen, like circulation being cut off. And then as we were laying there, I felt that my right leg was also, right ankle was also starting to swell. And so, you know, at one point, after, you know, again, Aavron was able to put in a picket, and then also when the other couple came down, they set up a picket as well and tied into our system in order to double secure us, which was huge relief for me. Yeah. You know, I was like, well, maybe I could move. And it's like, no. I literally was like, the pain was something I would never wish on anyone for how severe it was. I just, you know, the goal was just there to try to move as little as possible. You know, the couple helps put layers on, try to, you know, keep us warm, and then try to get off the mountain as soon as possible. The helicopter flew by over in the first hour and then left, and that was just like, oh my God. And it took another 45 minutes or more for the Rangers to get lowered down and dropped off. And then it was a little bit of like chaos. Like they were like telling the other two climbers, like, go see if you can like dig out a place for the helicopter to land. And they're talking about the different ways to get us off the mountain. I'm just like, oh my God, just get us out of here. And you know, the helicopter leaves again. And so at this point, you know, you're just you're just listening in, and it's just like, they're like, are we going to do Aavron first? We're going to do Kristin first. And, finally there's like, we're going to do baskets and we're going to get him off. And at this point, Aavron was, deteriorating more. You could hear it in his breathing, and just like, just get us out of here. So, yeah, so just pretty uncomfortable. They get Aavron off the mountain, and then it's my turn to get prepped. And
like,
the
when
part
they
that I was
decided
dreading.
to take him first, was that scary for you? Were you scared that they're not going to come back for you, or like, what was it feeling?
Not a, no. I was really glad they took him first. Like, like I not having any difficulty breathing or anything like that. Like, he needed to go. So at that point, I did not. I'll get to the one point where it started to get a little anxious. So for my turn, and what I've been dreading most was, in order to do in this basket, I had to turn over onto a like a sleeping pad, and then they would need to slide me into the basket that they would hook up. And like, I just screamed. Like, I traumatized the other climbers that were there with us. And that was just the only way to deal with the pain. I wish I'd passed out. I did not. So they've got me flipped over now, and they're starting to slide me into the basket. And this is when the ranger's like, hey, weather's coming in. You need to get here like now. And that was the only time, or the first time, because at that point I'm really looking down, and we'd had a lot of sun. And at that point, now that I moved, I can now look down the slope more, and I can see the system is just, coming up the mountain straight to us, and it's thick. And at this point, it's, coming up on noonish, I think. So, and we knew there was going to be some afternoon weather. We had been, our plan we would have been going down at this point. And yeah, it's coming in right on time. And that was the one moment where I'm like, oh my God, like, this helicopter needs to get here now, or I'm not getting off this mountain. I didn't process a lot until like after the fact of how bad that could have been. Fortunately we could hear the helicopter coming, and came in, hooked us up, and we got out, and like the winds were just starting to whip, and, we literally probably had like 5 to 10 minutes to spare of that, which again, just everything worked out amazingly. Yeah. So after the fact, I was like, damn, could have would I have survived up on the mountain? Like, probably, they would have probably had, more gear, more layers. I had a really good puffy, like, there might've been options, but I don't want to think about that. Yeah, it just wasn't really wasn't an option. It was like, I'm getting off the mountain now. Or to have to be carried down the mountain, like, I just would have wanted to been sedated for the amount of pain, that would have been. Yeah, so it was 10-minute helicopter ride, dangling 60 feet below, just trying to, breathe through the discomfort. And then when they put me down on the ground, I was just like, don't touch me. I do not move me until can I please have some pain meds? Like, it was just so significant. And, they gave me like some kind of nasal version of fentanyl, barely cut the edge off. And then I'm just like, they're asking me about my gear. I'm just like, just cut it all off. I don't want to feel anything. Just get it off of me. And this is where me and Aavron laughed that he almost killed me again, because like, I didn't know it was down. I thought it was like, even though this is, I don't know when those cotton seed things are in season. I thought it was like cottony ball things that float in the air, like some certain times of the year, especially up in Washington.
Trees, yeah.
No, Yeah, so I inhaled down and I just was like choking and coughing on it. And I was like, I need water. And they wouldn't give me water because they didn't know if I would go straight into surgery or anything like that. So they at least finally just gave me a medical mask so I wouldn't get anything more in my
So,
mouth. But
yeah, my
I was,
jacket was down, and like as I'm going under, and my eyes are closing, like they're cutting into my jacket, and I just see feathers go everywhere, and someone yells down, and so that's what she got. She got the feathers from my jacket that they cut off of me.
Well, you can laugh at it now,
yeah.
but
I didn't even know what it was at the time. And my jacket they were cutting too, and it also had down in it. So like could have been mine at that point.
like,
But
Say that.
this was July
say that
4th,
again.
and it's
Yeah.
December 23rd.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's happening with you now, Kristin? Like, what were the injuries? And tell me.
So I have I'm gonna butcher the type of fracture that it is. So the tibia was broken into quite a few pieces at the shin. The fibula is broken at the below the knee and the ankle. And so to fix that, they did surgery, a rod or screw all the way down the tibia, except on your knee, and go under your kneecap and put it all the way through, and they just piece the bone back to it, and then they don't do anything to the fibula. And then they put in an extra screw for the ankle on the left-hand side. The right-hand side, when they got in for surgery, so accident was the 4th, they took me into surgery in the morning of the 5th. They were waiting for just a little bit more time, and they also like did some manipulation for dislocation and whatnot, but decided to wait till the 5th for surgery. But the right one, you know, they thought it was just a ankle fracture. When they got in there, it ended up being a more severe fracture and impacted my ankle joint. And you know, that's still all bone, and so what they ended up doing was putting 12 different screws in there in order to piece it all back together, because it wasn't like getting traction. So I've been rehabbing, and everything was going really fast in terms of like, originally the surgeon was like, you know, you can start bearing weight on your left leg after about 6 weeks, and you can start bearing weight on your right leg after 12 weeks. But I transferred down to UC Davis here in California, where I rehabbed with my family, and that doctor was more aggressive. So he's like, you can start bearing weight on your right leg at 8 to 9 weeks because your x-rays are looking really good. So I did that. And I have been, you know, I've honestly been walking for a couple months now. But with that and with the rehab, I still haven't gotten to a point where I can walk normally or without pain. And so I also lost control of being able to lift my big toe on my left hand, left foot. So as we've kind of been going, and you know, I'm now, you know, 5 months, and rehab is, you know, my physical therapy has kind of been slowed down for the past month. And if anything, you know, as I've tapered off, and I'm just on like ibuprofen, I'm like, actually, like the pain is not reducing. I still have a lot of swelling. So I started to go back into a sports medicine orthopedic to get more diagnostics. And so, so 2 things that are kind of happening. One, for my right leg, they're going to remove 2 screws in January that go through both the tibia and fibula in the right ankle. And the reason is because as I try to gain back my range of motion in my right ankle, the way my PT describes it, it's less like, it's like, you know, you're hitting a bone. Your bone is hitting a bone, and it's potentially because those screws are locking down that tibia and fibula, which normally would have a little bit of give. And so you know, process is let's remove those, see if that gives a little bit more give and helps you get that last range of motion. And then on the left-hand side, it's probably nerve related, but we wanted to, make sure. So I have had an MRI of my ankle, and the tendons that control the big toe are called the haliosis, and there's like a longus and brevis, so a short and a long one. So those aren't torn, they're intact, and they are firing. And I actually just, like, as soon as I started this process, I now have a teeny bit of movement back in my big toe. So I'm like, maybe the nerves started to grow back and I won't need anything else. They did discover like a bunch of tears like in my ankle, like 2 tendons and 1 ligament, but they're very similar to a sprain, which I've actually never had an ankle sprain. So I think they can heal on their own and they don't cause me pain. So hopefully I won't actually have to have a procedure on the left-hand side, but if it were, it'd be to have to potentially remove scar tissue, or if the problem is further up in the shin area where, the bones like went through all the muscle, like that could be the, one place they might have to do a procedure, but it might just be just more patience. So at this point, they always said, a year to get back to 100%. And when I think 100%, that means in a year I'll be, running and yeah, totally. But that might mean I'm, finally just hitting that where I can start to really get to 100%, in a year. So we will see, but I've got, a really great team out here to work with, and I'm, pretty motivated.
Yeah.
So.
And mentally, emotionally, how are you doing?
For the most part, I think I'm okay, but honestly, like when Aavron did the podcast, I honestly didn't and wasn't ready to do it when he recorded it, and this felt more more time had passed, a little bit better. I just watched this documentary about the volcanic eruption in New Zealand that was on Netflix. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Pretty good. But I had a freaking meltdown, and this was last week or earlier this week, because the survivors were, going through and talking about, they thought they were going to die, and talking about their pain. I mean, these folks had burns over like 90% of their body, and just thinking about the pain and thinking about that feeling of them knowing or thinking that they're going to die just was very visceral. And it just all came back to me of like, okay, I'm not okay. Like, that's really affected me, and it is still hard. And like, even just talking about it now, like my body's shaking and cold, kind of similar to that shock feeling. Like, it's just it'll be a minute. And I have a huge fear of falling, so I've gone rock climbing. I've done one time gym and one time outdoor, very low, very, very easy routes, just because I don't have full strength and range of motion. But I was just clinging to have that rope real tight, because I don't want to feel that feel.
I think she froze. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
She might have froze.
Yeah, she's coming back.
Yeah. And Aavron, what about you? Like, how are you doing physically, emotionally, and mentally now?
I think I caught enough of that to answer the question. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I'll go ahead and answer that question. I mean, basically the same question as Kristin. Yeah. In the hospital, when let me think about this for a second. When I woke up after the second surgery, they had really opened it up a lot. I mean, it was big. You could see my ribs, you could see my sternum. Yeah, so they cut out a bunch of tissue about yay big, right? And so there's literally, they took all the tissue out in this area all the way down to the bone. And then they were scraping out parts of my rib and part of my sternum to get rid of any infection, osteomyelitis. Is that right? I think that's right. And so they were talking about removing my xiphoid process and even a potential large chunk of my sternum and chunks of my ribs. And that set me back. And that was tough. And I think moving through the process of having this wound vac where you have this big sponge in your chest and you just have this open wound, and it, like at this point, you know, there's so little area between this open wound and my heart. And so they even told me, they're like, you're not out of the danger window. Like, this is the possibility of infection here and that outcome, like, is still very significant. And so that was kind of a little bit of a hard period for me. My stress and anxiety was just like through the roof at that point. I was having a hard time sleeping. I was worried about, there were phases where it would like heal really well between appointments, where I'd go and have the sponge and the vacuum and everything changed in the wound. Phases where like it, and so I was really trying to make sure that I ate enough to get the calorie needs that I needed to heal. Gained 20 pounds. I've since lost 6 since I started being active again. I'm trying to get back down. But that was a very tough period. I never had, you know, Chris, we've talked, and Kristin's had nightmares and flashbacks and all that kind of stuff. I never had that. I think the injury itself and the potential outcome from that was what was on my mind. I've started climbing again. I've started skiing again. I went skiing for the first time a couple weeks ago, and I thought that could be really interesting, like how that would go. It was just like a few days before that, I was like, you know, I'll be on snowy, icy slopes. Like, will that initiate some kind of emotional response from me? I thought that several days ahead. Then I went and did it, and when I was there, I never even thought about it. Like, after the fact, I was like, oh, I went and did this thing, and I never thought about it. Recovery. So I started climbing again, put on some weight, definitely lost my endurance and some strength. And it's been very interesting. I'm trying to build a strong foundation, build slowly. I've already seen big improvements I'm pretty happy with. But the big thing is when I started doing, like, I started just for sets of pull-ups, I did 5 by 1. So I did 5 sets of 1 pull-up and just real slow on the eccentric. And then just did like a couple of dips. That I could feel that through my torso. And that was a really interesting feeling. That's gotten better. I don't notice that as much anymore. But overall, you know, aside from this period where it was like really questionable as to what the outcome could potentially be, I mean, because they were talking about, with all that removal, having to have metal within, you know, my sternum and all this other kinds of stuff. It's really gone pretty well. I've been pretty fortunate. I also want to say, like, the other thing that I've been very fortunate with is my girlfriend is not just a veterinarian, but she's also a major in the Army, and she's been deployed overseas, and she's dealt with a lot of stuff. And I think I mentioned it in the podcast, but holy smokes, I can't imagine anyone having gone through this with me better than she did. She never complained, not once. She changed all my dressings every day. Like, I had to do dressing changes several times a day. And so, you know, she was always there to change my dressings. She was, when we were in the phase of this, the medical care I'm getting seems kind of ridiculous and subpar. She was like, if you were a dog, I would do this. You know, if you were a dog, I would do that, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, you know, made a joke. It's like, kind of getting tired of being compared to a dog. But but what's funny about it is, like, everything that she said is what they eventually did. So if I had to do it again, dealing with puncture wounds, I might go to a veterinarian. No, but she was amazing. And she's was so incredibly supportive. And that certainly made it easier. But it's gone pretty well overall. When I tell people now, I'm talking to people and they know about my accident, they ask me, or it's at the gym, people at the climbing gym, I don't even know, just walk up to me and they're like, "You're that guy, right?" And I'm like, "What guy?" And it's like, obviously I know what they're talking about. And then it's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "So when did this happen again?" And I'll be like, "Oh, it happened in July." Or, and they're just completely taken back to like, there's no way. Like, July? That's when this happened? July? So I think I've been very fortunate. It's both been bad and gone extremely well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you both have success stories, and even though the regaining the strength and losing the weight and moving your entire life to a new town to go to to really invest more into PT, with all those physical changes in your body and your lives, that you both are doing the best that you can mentally and emotionally to move forward. So that's really inspiring to me as I'm circling the drain. But
She
hi,
just
everyone's girlfriend.
walked in. So this is Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi. Nice to see you in person.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, I just want to get to a few questions before we wrap it up, if that's okay with you both. Okay, so just gonna scroll up on the comments here really quick. Games Carlson says hello. Megan Company says hi. Why Mutate Dup says thank you all for doing this follow-up. Kate Ford, my marketer, says looking good, Ashley. Thanks, Kate. Pine Isle says hola from Palm Springs. Dr. says, will this be available after it's done? If I can figure out how to download it. It's my first time. KW Space Bitch Adventure says, hi KJ, love you bunches. The Dirt Baguette says, you two are so brave. Megan Company says, Aavron, don't forget to shout out to your Natalie, which you did. Maybe I don't know. Brambler Amble Fumble says, given how far you fell, did you consider running belays?
We actually had this conversation with my climbing mentor. We did like a deep, still up in Seattle recovering, and the practicality you would just never end up getting to your destination. So it's definitely was a risk analysis, and I can say, of course hindsight would be, yeah, we should have turned around, or we could have, but we were just kind of on the slope that was getting steeper. It didn't feel that icy until it was, and my crampons were holding, felt really secure. I had one thought that was like, this could suck on the way down if it doesn't soften up a little bit. And that probably would have been the one thought where we probably should have stopped and had a conversation about the situation.
I agree with that. Like, I think we were up until the point of falling, like, it was a very comfortable situation. But then again, there's that underlying thought, if you like rewind and go back to, it's like, this is really going to suck on the way down, unless it softens up. I hope it softens up by then. And that's the indicator for me that says that, like she said, like Kristin have said, we should have stopped and had a conversation or something like that. Like that's because for the angle of the terrain, that setting up a belay is just in where we were at. Like certainly when it's far more technical, that's something that you obviously do. That's not something that you obviously do on the terrain that we were on. And so, yeah.
Thanks for, oh, go ahead.
And if you're ever uncomfortable, there's absolutely nothing wrong with setting up a belay or setting up a safety, and especially back down. If you're like, hey, this is starting to get too dicey, let's, set up this running belay, especially to go back down. Yeah, that would have been a good choice.
Thanks. NC Nels was wondering, well, I guess you've already answered this question, Kristin, that your ice axe was tethered to you, but
was not.
Was Nels was wondering, was your ice axe tethered to you anywhere at the time of the fall, your harness or your wrist? So the answer, so you can both answer that.
Yeah, I chose not to. I've heard, I've certainly heard both ways, but actually, I used to have a leash on mine, and then actually had removed it because it was more of a tripping hazard, and it is something that you could fall on.
How do you know that?
I've heard both ways.
And
so mine was.
Yeah, yours was.
Yeah, mine was tethered to me. It was tethered to my belay loop, and I've thought about this a lot. Like this is the big question for me, obviously, that looms in my head. And I've even looked at conversations about this, not involving me, on message boards and the alpinism page and all this kind of stuff. And I keep going back and forth. Part of me is like, well, I'll tether it, but I'll extend the leash. Well, the chances of extending the leash, losing my ice axe, finding another point where I might gain control over it again, pull it to me, get it back in my hand, and still be able to arrest, this probably not very probable. And I still don't have a definitive answer as to what I would choose. We'll find out when I go back to Rainier this spring and try it again. Because I think that will dictate my preference very clearly.
Yeah. I got an email from this guy named Tim Noble who had a lot of really great comments regarding this incident, and he with equipment specifically, he says it seems as if Aavron was tethered to his ice axe while climbing. It seems like Aavron was tethered to his ice axe while climbing. There's a great nuanced conversation to be had here about the advantages of doing so, which kind of you alluded to, Kristin. Some pros of being tethered: the ability to move more meaningfully connected to oneself belay, the ability to regain control of an ice axe if you accidentally drop it. And some cons are additional clutter, potential decreased mobility of the axe, potential for the axe to inflict harm in a fall, as happened here. And so he was wondering, when Aavron gets back on the mountain, will Aavron continue to choose to be tethered at all times to his axe, or forego the permanent tether and choose temporary tethers as the situation dictates? So when you do go back to Rainier this spring, please send me an email answering that question so I can forward it on.
I'll let you know. I might just get up there and take it and be like, 2 ice axes on Rainier. Just chuck that thing into the wind.
Yeah. And to add to that, I don't know if you remember this from Mick saying, but if you are tethered to it, as soon as you stop, if you take your ice axe and just, get it firmly into the snow, you have set up it's not maybe the best anchor, but it's still something. So maybe in that situation, when he started to fall, the fact that he was tethered to it, it could have, been there to help self-arrest him.
I think it's going to be one of those things that, like I said, I've seen the conversation go back and forth so much that the end result is there's reasons to and there's reasons not to, and it's going to come down to a personal preference. What do you think is the greater risk for you?
Yeah, thanks. Scarecrow GPG asked, what has the recovery process been like for both of you, which I think we covered pretty well. Josh Keene says, is this craziest interview location. Yes, I think this is the craziest interview location I've had, being in Ecuador. Outdoor Risk says, hi, Steve. Outdoor Risk says, people who have near-death experiences sometimes see their lives differently afterwards. How do you see your lives differently after this event?
I'll let you go first, Kristin.
Yeah. As much as it pains me, I will be doing maybe not as much in the future. This is where I cry. I mean, being still in a place where I physically can't do those things, I'm not gonna say I'm not. But right now, I'm happy to look up at the mountain. I'm happy to be a kid when the snow falls and enjoy it out my window. But, I'm not going to be able to get up on my snowboard this year. And honestly, I'm not stressed about it if I don't. So we'll see. All right, I'm going to...
I'm looking at Natalie. I told Natalie the only way I'd propose to her was on top of her. What'd you say, Kristin? She said, what'd you say, Kristin?
I think that was
okay.
Ashley.
Yeah, I don't, for me, it has not deterred me. I'm ready to go. I'm building up my strength. Natalie and I had planned on doing some multi-pitch and Red Rocks back over Thanksgiving. We decided not to go, mainly just because I wasn't physically ready. I just didn't have the endurance and the strength yet to be doing 1,000-foot plus climbs. But we've got a trip for Red Rocks planned in February. I've got Kilimanjaro on the books in August or September. I'm looking at doing Rainier this spring, and I'm also hoping to do this spring Chimborazo or what's the other one right there, right next to it? Not Cotopaxi, but yeah, the Chimborazo or the other one next to it. I'm thinking about surprisingly, Jorn and another friend of mine. We've talked about also potentially doing Denali this spring. I have been waiting to see how my level of physicality comes out before I commit to that, because that's quite the commitment, and I'd want to train quite a bit for it. And I think I'm ready to start doing that training and potentially be prepared for that. We'll see if that happens or not. What I have found very interesting is the number of people that have reached out to me after my accident and been like, hey, as soon as you heal, you got to do this with me. You got to take me to do this. And like Jorn said, hey, I'll climb Denali with you. And I'm like, are you crazy? You watched me fall down Rainier. It's like, I got to find some people to do this stuff with, like on a site where they don't know about my accident or something like that. But it hasn't deterred me. I hiked part of a 14er with a wound vac on. Natalie was not happy with me. She's sitting here snickering right now, but I'm ready to go. And I think whatever Kristin wants to do, like I'm here to do it with her, at whatever level. So, I can't wait to start doing things with Kristin again.
That's an awesome.
Yeah, I mean, hiking. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I can walk without pain, I'm looking forward to hiking again. That will be my speed for a minute.
Thanks for being so vulnerable, but you both for answering that question. Ray Rock C Step. Aavron's in Arkansas here praying a lot for you, Kristin. Live for Weekend Warrior says you guys are so strong. Kevin Asa says, don't forget your first outdoor adventure since the accident, the Flatirons, you crushed it.
He's going to give me a hard time if I don't correct his name pronunciation, so I'm not going to do it.
I know I'm probably butchering these Instagram handles. Ray Roxy Step also says Natalie is awesome for sure. Megan Company says attaboy. We love you, Kristin from Washington, says Mick Pearson 11. Mick Pearson says, after your story, it feels like having something to clip to tether at rest, but not having it clipped during travel. Rambler Ramble Fumble says, you mentioned you had to find a place to stop to eat and drink. Did you consider chopping a platform to stand on, which might have prevented the fall?
Yeah, so this is something that we've talked about a lot too with Kristin's mountaineering group that she's involved with. And one of the comments he made was like, I could tell you to do this, but it's nothing I would have done myself. It's like, well, ideally after the accident, you could have set an anchor and you could have clipped into it, or you could have dug out a what's that?
Coulda, woulda, coulda.
Yeah. And he's like, I would have done the same thing that you did. And I do think even with part of the reason that I chose the area to stop that I did is because we were in the steepest terrain that we had been on. And there was this that I thought, based on everything else, was going to be a soft point because the snow was really releasing off of the surface at that point, and those points had tended to be a little bit softer, and you could bust through it. Like you'd kick once and then like you'd crack it, and then you kick twice and it punched into it, and you get some powdery snow that poofed out of it, and you kick a third time and you get some depth and you get good traction. So because it had this release point and just the texture looked a little different, I was like, this is where I'm going to get the traction to be able to do this. Never went through, right? And so I think I cracked it. It was what was at lower elevation, a softer point. But where we were at this point, it had been a little bit harder. And so it didn't break. I ended up standing on top of it because it was a little bit flatter in the angle. And then torque and crack propagation is what ended up making it broke up in my right footfall. So 6 of one, half a dozen or the other. You could choose a bunch of different things after the fact to say whatever you want to say about the situation, but I don't know that it would have helped. And like standing at that angle trying to dig out a platform could have led to the same thing in the end anyway. Just trying to be at that angle and swinging the axe and whatever else.
That's an interesting response. And that same gentleman who wrote in earlier about a different comment, Tim Noble, he also had a question about the same thing. His comment is, specifically providing security when on snow, particularly harder snow, there are 3 security mechanisms for snow: movement, self-belay, and intermediate protection. When climbing in the terrain that you both were, intermediate protection is often foregone, as in this case, due to the time-intensive nature of placing and removing protection. So Tim's question is, as Aavron settled into a stance and began to take his mind off of his movement in order to be able to eat and drink, etc., did he attempt to provide any self-belay protection by placing and clipping into his ice axe, or by placing a picket or screw if appropriate? And if not, does he think this could be worth keeping in mind for the future or for other climbers who arrive at a stance on snow in order to engage in self-care?
I mean, if I had to do it over again, at minimum, I would have thrown my ice axe in as an anchor, right? Like at absolute minimum. I think those are all valid points, but yeah, I mean, I would have.
So that answers the question. You would put you use your ice axe as a self-belay. Yeah, or like a.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, here's one. Mr. Neil Ross, how did you talk to your kids about the incident? And I know the answer to this, but I don't think that listeners do.
Yeah. When we got back, did we tell the boys before everyone came over, like a welcome back party?
What happened?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we had told, like, I'm very, blunt. I don't direct with my children. Like, I don't sugarcoat things. And so I'd already told them, but they had not grasped the gravity of the situation. And so people kept asking me that as well. Like, have you told your kids? Do they understand what happened? And I'm like, oh, yeah. I've told them, they get it. But then with as many times as I had been asked, I kind of questioned. I was like, do they really understand? And so I sat them down and I told them I asked them if they got it, and they're like, well, we think so. And so then I told them again, what happened and the gravity of the situation, and they both started to cry, which at that point I felt bad. I was like, yeah, I still think it was important to tell them, and I should have told them, but like I certainly felt bad after that, and they treated me very differently after that. As we said in the podcast, like Caleb kept running into the other room one evening, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm going into the other room to fart because I don't want my farts to infect your wound. So it's like he doesn't want my wound to get infected from passing gas. So it was really adorable. But yeah, I've told them about it. They understand. They do, and they do a lot of crazy stuff with me. They've bagged 13, 14ers. Kristin's bagged 14ers with me and the boys. My oldest is climbing multi-pitch. They rock climb. They ski. They're crazy. And shockingly to me, I'd expect that it would slow them down, or they might be a little going again. I wonder if when she's frozen, if as well for the viewers. Okay.
I don't think. Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
No.
But who knows?
Going to two more comments left, and then we could wrap it up. But Mick Pearson 11 says, "Such a big heart you have." I think she's probably talking to all three of us. Kate Gold Empowerment says, "Kristin, your time will come. Healing is a double-edged sword and gift. Just took a year off. Don't have FOMO. You aren't alone." I'm also going to take that comment for myself too. You keep that. And those are all. Oh, let's see. One person. There's one question. Oh, and NC Nell says, other than the energy gel, what interventions did the skiers perform?
They got all of our layers out of our jackets, as well as gave us layers. Yeah. And we both had emergency bivy, so they pulled those out, put that over our legs, anything that they could for extra layers. Also just a little bit of water, anything that we could stomach to get down because we were on the mountain 4 to 5 hours. So, we needed a little bit of sustenance. And then, they were also digging out the potential helicopter landing pad, which, we ended up opting not to use. And then they helped with, for lowering us down to the baskets. They helped the Rangers with really belaying us down as an extra protection to get us lowered down onto the basket, and then so that we could get picked up by the helicopter in the right spot. So they were really, really active. They helped pack up all of our gear, and that got attached to my basket to get flown off the mountain. And then unfortunately they just had to get down the mountain on their own, and we got to connect with them, a couple months later and hear their side of the story too. And it was just what an incredibly long, harrowing day for them too. And they are lifesavers, and so much appreciation to them.
I want to comment on, I personally think so. There was this, dig out a helipad situation, which if you know anything about doing anything with avalanches, that's a ridiculous idea. And so I think what that came out of, Jorn and them were not directly in contact with SAR. They were in contact with emergency services who were in contact with SAR. I'm 100% certain that SAR wouldn't say, dig us a helipad. And so I think there was a miscommunication that came from, the regular emergency service that was probably to the effect of, let's dig out a platform that we can move Aavron and Kristin to be able to, get them in the litter. I wouldn't even call it a litter. It's like it was like a body bag. But I think that's what was meant by that. So no criticism to SAR whatsoever. 100% they didn't tell them to dig out a helipad.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. And I think that's a great place to kind of close is, thank you first off to both of you so much for reliving this again. And again, I wish you both the healthiest recoveries. Thanks for being vulnerable with me and for the people that have joined today. And thanks to Search and Rescue for, all the Search and Rescue folks who volunteer their time to embark on these, these adventurous, unknown experiences to rescue people like us who, things happen and they're so selfless and they've spent hours and hours and hours training for these things. So thank you so much to all the SAR volunteers that are out there. And yeah, is there anything last minute that you two want to say before we close?
I just wanted to reiterate my in terms of just gear, and I've had some folks ask me, just the redundancy of safety equipment was critical for us getting off that mountain. So even if one person has an inReach, no reason why you both can't, or have some kind of device on you. I was stripped of everything is quite the lesson in gear attachment as well. So always happy to share any of those lessons learned as well. And thank you for my family and my friends, who are my family, who have been there with me through this process. And I really, really appreciate all the kind words and love and support and those who joined today too. So thank you.
To further Kristin's inReach comment, I've seen a lot of discussions because of this as to whether the inReach should be in the backpack or out of the backpack. And I can tell you definitively 100% without question, I wouldn't put it in. I would stick it on a locking carabiner still on my shoulder, because I think for me to get out get it out of the backpack, I don't know if I could have done it. I really don't. And then Kristin wouldn't have been able to get to me. And there's a lot of people like, oh, you assess the medical situation, blah, blah, blah. That's with the idea that there's somebody else there that's capable of helping you. So I think the expectation should be that you, in an accident, the only person you're going to have to depend on is yourself. I felt very good with having the DMM locking mini carabiner to my pack, and I would do it again. So in closing, I want to thank, obviously, my girlfriend, who's been there for me in just a ridiculous and unbelievable way. I want to tell my boys, because I know that they're going to watch this, that I love them. And Kristin, I want to tell you that I love you too.
I love you too. I'm glad we're here to say that.
Well, I love you all. And Rocky Talkies for giving great gear for you to be able to use that as a rescue, and Garmin inReach and MyMedic for providing really awesome first aid stuff. And thanks so much for being on the show and sharing your vulnerability, and have a really awesome rest of your day, you too.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, everybody.
Bye, Kristin.
If I could download this thing.
Bye, everyone.